So for this video, I'm going to be ranking all of the studio albums by Led Zeppelin. And of course, if you don't know, Led Zeppelin is my all-time favorite band. So this is going to be kind of hard because I really enjoy all of these albums. I will say, however, that the first, like my top two favorite Led Zeppelin albums are pretty set in stone. Like they've been consistently my favorite Led Zeppelin albums for a long time. My bottom two are fairly consistent. It's kind of everything in between though, like 3 through 7 that can kind of intermingle just depending on my mood. And they've changed a lot because Led Zeppelin's been my favorite band for over half my life, basically since middle school. I got into them, and yeah, they kind of it kind of flip flops back and forth between, like which one's better and which one's what I rank kind of towards the bottom. But for right now, this is what I'm going to go with. This is my ranking as of right now. I'm sure if I made this video even, like 6 months from now, or even like next year, it would be a little bit different. But I'm just going to go with what I'm feeling right now. So this is my ranking. And please leave comments down below what you think of my ranking, whether you agree or disagree with me. And just leave your ranking, or if you just want to leave like your favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time, please leave all of those lovely comments down below. And thanks again for watching. And yeah, let's just jump right into it. So coming in at number 9 on the list, this should surprise no one because usually, I've watched a lot of ranking videos in the past. This is usually the last place for a lot of people, and that would be Coda. Now, Coda came out in 1982, a few years after the death, of course, of John Bonham, my all-time favorite drummer. And a lot of these songs are kind of just outtakes. Songs that never were released on any of their previous albums, just kind of an amalgamation of just random songs. And the studio basically needed them to put out an album because they had one more album on their contract, and they didn't want to make any new music without John Bonham. So basically they just put together all of these songs. And even though it is number 9, it is in last place, I still really like this album. There's a lot of really cool songs on here. You've got We're Gonna Groove, which is very fast paced. That's kind of like one of their earlier songs. Poor Tom is such a cool deep cut, one of John Bonham's best drum grooves. I Can't Quit You Baby, which was on their first album, but this is kind of like a live rendition a little bit. Then you got Ozone Baby and Darlene, pretty cool deep cuts. You got Bonzo's Mantra, which is a pretty cool drum solo. And then you've got Walter's Walk and Wearing and Tearing, which are not my favorite, but they're still pretty good. So overall, this album does have some really cool deep cuts, but unfortunately, it had to be in the last place. So this is number 9 on the list. And for number 8 on the list, we have In Through the Outdoor, which is infamously in the paper bag. Hopefully I can pull this out right. There we go. So yeah, this is number 8, In Through the Outdoor. This is the last studio album that they made basically as a band. This came out in 1979, and overall the sound is a little different. They're kind of straying away from their really hard rock and bluesy kind of stuff, and they're kind of starting to experiment a little bit. And you've got John Paul Jones doing a lot of keyboard stuff and very melodic stuff. So overall, it's not really one of my favorites, but it does have a lot of great songs on here. Probably my favorite being Fool in the Rain, but you've also got cool songs like In the Evening, and then you've got little songs like Hot Dog, which is just hilarious. Overall, though, it does have one of my least favorite songs, which is Carissa Alhambra. The kind of the beginning of that song almost gives me a headache because it's just so repetitive. So that's one of my least favorite Led Zeppelin songs. But overall, it's a pretty cool album. You've also got the ballad, of course, All My Love, and then you've got, what else is on here? Southbound Saraz, which is a pretty cool little song. And then you've got the closer of I'm Gonna Crawl, which kind of more sounds like the beginning of Led Zeppelin with like the bluesy stuff. And yeah, overall, very good album, but It comes in at number 8 on the list. And for number 7 on the list, we have Presence. Now, I really love this album, and this album has Achilles' Last Stand, which is just one of their most epic sounding songs and one of my all-time favorites. But then you've also got deep cuts like Nobody's Fault But Mine. You've got T for One, which is really cool. You've also got For Your Life and Royal Orleans, which are pretty cool deep cuts as well. And what else is on here? You got Hot's On for Nowhere, very cool song. And then probably the song that one of my least favorites is Candy Store Rock. This is kind of what makes the album not really a perfect album because all the rest of the songs are really good. Candy Store Rock is kind of like an Elvis-y song, kind of like their nod to Elvis. Not a big Elvis fan. I know Elvis obviously inspired a lot of bands, including Led Zeppelin. That song's always been one of my least favorites, and that's the song that kind of keeps this from being higher up on the list. If there were like another really great song, this would definitely be higher up on the list because obviously Achilles' Last Stand and Nobody's Fault But Mine, T for One, really cool songs. And we got some really cool deep cuts in here as well. Candy Store Rock has always been kind of one of my least favorites, but I still really love this album. But unfortunately, it does come a little bit towards the bottom of the list at number 7. So we have Presence at number 7. So for number 6, I have a bit of a hot take here. I know for a lot of people, this is their favorite Led Zeppelin album, and most people would probably put it in their top 3. I don't even have it in my top 5, which is kind of saying a lot for how much I love these other albums, because this is a really great album. I'll go ahead and jump right into it. It's Led Zeppelin 2, which came out in 1969, the same year as their first album. I really love this album. But the reason why it's so low on the list is because a lot of these songs that are on here, even though they are great, I actually like them live. I prefer the live renditions. So obviously you got Whole Lotta Love, classic for a reason, but I do love the live version. You've got Heartbreaker, but again, I love the live version. You've got Bring It On Home. I love the live version more. And then, of course, as a drummer, I love Moby Dick. And, of course, I do love the studio version, but the live version, any live version, really, where John Bonham just goes nuts on the drums. Yeah, so a lot of these songs are just better live for me. Of course, you've also got songs that they probably haven't played live that much. You've got Thank You. You've got the Lemon Song. You've got Livin' Loving Maid. You've got What Is and What Should Never Be. I'm sure I'm forgetting another one. Oh, and of course, how could I forget Ramble On? Another huge song from them. But yeah, overall, I do really love this album, and I completely understand why people would put it at their number 1 spot, or even in their top 3. But for me, even though this is a really solid album, I love it. I do love the live versions a little bit more. So a lot of the times when I go to listen to songs such as Moby Dick, I'm listening to the live version. Same with Heartbreaker, Whole Lotta Love, all of that stuff. I just prefer the live versions. And yeah, so that's why this is number 6 on the list, a little bit lower than people would probably usually put it. But that's just my opinion. Do it with that what you will. But yeah, number 6, Led Zeppelin number 2. And for number 5 on the list, cracking into the top 5, we have Led Zeppelin 3. Which might be my favorite Led Zeppelin album cover, maybe. Maybe that's another video idea, ranking their covers. But yeah, really cool album cover. Obviously, we got songs like Immigrant Song, which is just one of their most famous songs. Awesome song. And then you've got Since I've Been Loving You, which is another one of my favorites. But the reason why this album is so high on the list is the deep cuts. The deep cuts on this album are so good. You've got Friends and Celebration Day, which kind of bleed into one another. Very cool. One of my favorite John Bonham songs is Out on the Tiles. Such a cool drum song with such a cool drum beat. One of my favorites to play on drum set. I am a drummer. And then what else you got? Gallows Pole. Really cool deep cut. Tangerine. That's the Way. Some really cool acoustic stuff on here. I can't pronounce. I've never been able to pronounce this. Bronayur Stomp. Really cool acoustic, very simple song. And then kind of the one song on here that's like, not my favorite and kind of keeps it from being like a perfect album, because this is almost a perfect album, is Hats Off to Roy Harper. It's kind of a neat little song, but it's never been one of my favorites. That's the one song that keeps this from being a perfect album, because the rest of this album is just top-notch Led Zeppelin at their best. But that one song has never been one of my favorites. But yeah, this album is just so good. And not only, obviously Immigrant Song and Since I've Been Loving You are like concert staples, fan favorites. But for me, it really comes down to the deep cuts. The deep cuts on this album are fantastic. So yeah, the number 5 spot goes to Led Zeppelin number 3. And now we come to the number 4 spot on the list. And really the number 3 and number 4 spot on the list are the toughest for me. Number 1 and 2 are pretty cemented as my 2 favorites, but 3 and 4 I always go back and forth on, like which one should be in the top 3 or not. But for right now, maybe an unpopular opinion, but number 4 for me is Physical Graffiti. I know a lot of people cite this as their favorite, and a lot of people would put it in their top 2 or 3. But for me, there are 3 Led Zeppelin albums for now that I do enjoy more. Physical Graffiti, 1975, one of the best double albums of all time. Not a bad song on here. All of these songs are really good, and with it being a double album, so many deep cuts on here. I gotta pull out the vinyls to remember which songs are on here. I used to be able to list, back in middle school when I got obsessed with them, I used to be able to list just every Led Zeppelin song in order. I can't do that anymore. My brain doesn't work that way anymore. But yeah, there's just so many great songs on this double album. You got Custard Pie. You got The Rover, which is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin deep cuts. So good. In My Time of Dying, I think their longest song, so good. What else? You got Houses of the Holy, which, funnily enough, should have been on their Houses of the Holy album, but it wasn't, so it's on here. You got Trampled Underfoot. Really good. You got the classic of Kashmir. What can I say about Kashmir? And then their second side, I think, has a lot of deep cuts. Or the second album, I should say. In the Light, really cool, ominous sound. And you got the little acoustic of Bron Ayer. Again, I can't pronounce that. Down by the Seaside, really fun song. 10 Years Gone, another deep cut that's just so good. What else? Night Flight, the Wonton Song, Boogie with Stu, Black Country Woman, and Sick Again. Sick Again might be my least favorite, but overall, just this album doesn't have bad songs, and it's got 15 songs, so it's really, really good. But yeah, Physical Graffiti at number 4. Sometimes I, flip-flop, and I put it at the number 3 spot, but for now, I'm going to put it at number 4. Just so many great deep cuts on this album. And now we get to the top 3. So my number 3 favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time, we're going back to the very beginning, Led Zeppelin 1, the debut from 1969. I love this album. Of course, I love all these albums, but I really love this album. You've got Good Times, Bad Times, one of the best drum songs ever. One of the best, just first album songs ever. And I love how diverse this album is, especially for a debut, because a lot of the times debut, you're trying to find your sound, but in this one, they just did a lot of experimentation and just had so many different types of genres. You've got Good Times, Bad Times, which is just a really good rockin' song. And then they go folksy with Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, so good. And then they go straight to the blues with You Shook Me. And then you've got Dazed and Confused. They go psychedelic, one of the best Led Zeppelin songs ever. Your Time Is Gonna Come, a little bit more softer. And then Black Mountainside, you've got a folksy instrumental. Communication Breakdown, really fast rockin' song. I Can't Quit You Baby, a little bit more jazzy and bluesy. And then How Many More Times, definitely jazz and rock jazz, but so many great songs on this album. I kind of weirdly underrated. Not a lot of people would put it this high on the list, I think, but they knocked it out of the park with this album. One of the best debut albums of all time. I love this album. I do sometimes flip-flop, like I said. Like, sometimes I'm more in the mood for Physical Graffiti, but I think overall, I do enjoy this album a bit more. I love all of these songs. I will say, if there is a weak point on the album, it is Communication Breakdown. A tad overrated, maybe. Like, it's sometimes on their greatest hits album, but really, it's probably my least favorite on the album. Overall, though, I love all of these songs, and it comes in at number 3 on the list. And now we get to my top 2 favorite Led Zeppelin albums of all time. They've been my 2 favorite for a long time, and they're just perfect albums in my mind. I love the rest of the Led Zeppelin albums. I wouldn't consider them perfect. When I say perfect, I mean it's really hard for me to choose a least favorite song. I mean, I can, but it's really hard, and I just love both of these albums. I think they're perfect. So anyway, number 2, we have Houses of the Holy, which now, of course, you already know what number 1 is, if you know Led Zeppelin, but Houses of the Holy, my second favorite. Again, with Led Zeppelin 1, I love how diverse this album is. You've got Song Remains the Same, really cool, just rockin' song, and then immediately you go into the Rain song, very mellow and dramatic and slow. Love it. And then you jump into Over the Hills and Far Away, one of the most just like majestic sounding rock songs of all time. And then you go into the Crunge, which is just, I know a lot of people really don't like this song, and that is probably what keeps this from being a perfect album. But I love this album. I love that song. It's so quirky, and it's got such a weird drum beat time signature thing going on. It's just a weird song, and I love it. And then you jump to the second side. You got Dancing Days, another classic. Love it. Then you got Dire Maker, which is kind of a Jamaican reggae kind of sound to it, which is, I know a lot of people don't love that either, but I really like it. And you got No Quarter, which is kind of just like a doom and gloom kind of proggy sound, progressive rock sound. One of my all-time favorites. And then, of course, it ends with The Ocean, which is my all-time favorite Led Zeppelin song. So, yeah, it's hard for me to not love this album and put it at the number 2 spot. Like I said, such a diverse sound, so many different types of genres being played around in this album, and I just love listening to this album from beginning to end. So good. So yeah, number 2 is Houses of the Holy. And of course, we only have one album left. Not only is this my favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time, it's just my favorite album of all time from any band ever. And it has been for many, many years. And of course, if you're a Led Zeppelin fan like I am, you already know what it is. So enough beating around the bush. My favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time is Led Zeppelin 4, aka the Untitled Album. And what can I say about this album that hasn't already been said? And I don't have to look up the songs to this one, because I already know them by heart. Yeah, well, they're already on here, so they're all right there. But yeah, of course, you've got the big hits that are radio staples. You can't really put on a classic rock radio station without hearing Black Dog, Rock and Roll, or Stairway to Heaven, at least once a day, probably. And I love those songs, but again, for me, it's the deep cuts that really make this album. Like I said, Black Dog and Rock and Roll are great, love them, but then you got the Battle of Evermore, which is just kind of a weird, folksy, just epic sounding song. It's one of the rare songs that actually has a different singer besides Robert Plant sing with Robert Plant on here. I can't remember the singer's name, but kind of back and forth. It's really good. Then you got Misty Mountain Hop, which is, I love John Bonham, and that's one of his best drum songs, in my opinion. Really cool sound. And then, of course, Four Sticks, also another just fantastic deep cut. And again, a lot of people would probably point to Four Sticks being their least favorite, kind of an odd one out as to being a perfect album. But for me, Four Sticks is just one of the coolest drum songs of all time. It's in a weird time signature, and it's a really hard song to play. And if you haven't heard of Four Sticks, go listen to it. It's a really cool drum song. You got Going to California, another kind of folksy, just Robert Plant, John Paul Jones playing acoustic, and Robert Plant just nailing the vocals. And then you've got one of the best album closers of all time, probably besides The Ocean. I love The Ocean. But When the Levee Breaks, again, one of the coolest drum songs, one of the coolest drum beats of all time. And it's funny because even though two of these songs don't have drums on them, like they're just kind of more acoustic songs, it's still one of the best drum albums of all time, if not the best. Because obviously just Black Dog, Rock and Roll, and then Stairway to Heaven, of course, like the first half of the song doesn't have drums. The second half does, and it just really complements, Jimmy Page's guitar solo and everything. And then, of course, Misty Mountain Hop, Four Sticks, really cool drum songs, and then When the Levee Breaks. Come on. So I could talk about this album all day. It's my favorite album of all time and easily my favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time. So number one spot has to go to Led Zeppelin 4. All right, so that is my ranking of every Led Zeppelin studio album. And if you want to recap real quick, we've got number 9, we've got Coda. And then number 8, we've got In Through the Outdoor. And then number 7, we have Presence. And number 6, kind of a hot take probably, Led Zeppelin 2. And then number 5, we have Led Zeppelin 3. Number 4, maybe another hot take, Physical Graffiti. And then the top 3 are Led Zeppelin 1. And then number 2, we have Houses of the Holy. And number 1, of course, Led Zeppelin 4, the Untitled Album. My number 1 favorite Led Zeppelin album, and just in general, my favorite album of all time. So, what I want to know is, what do you guys think of my list? Do you agree or disagree with my ranking? And if so, leave it down in the comments. What are your favorite Led Zeppelin albums, and how would you rank them? I want to know down in the comments below. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to J-Thunda's music reviews. And if you want to see any more Led Zeppelin content, please leave that in the comments down below also. And yeah, thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. Thank you guys so much.